My husband and my business partner thought they shared the perfect plan to ruin me. They took my company, my house, and my future. But they overlooked one thing: the $82,000 I had stashed away for an emergency. They didn't know my plan was already in motion, and their storm had just arrived. My name is Eliza Vance. I am, or perhaps I was, 36 years old and the co-founder of Auratech Solutions. From our office on the 19th floor, you could see the whole of Austin stretching out, a gleaming map of our ambition. We had glass walls, polished concrete floors, and a client roster that was the envy of every digital strategy firm in Texas. On paper, my life was perfect. It was a beautiful, transparent lie. Chloe Rivera and I built Auratech from nothing. We were the classic startup story, two women with laptops in a cramped coffee shop, sketching out a future on the backs of napkins. I was the brain, the creative force. I saw the patterns, the digital ether, the pathways to connect clients with a future they didn't even know they wanted. Chloe was the muscle, the operator. She was relentlessly efficient, a shark in negotiations, the person who turned my abstract visions into cold, hard, profitable reality. We were a perfect partnership. And then there was Mark, my husband, Mark Vance. He joined us 3 years in. Once we were stable, he was our chief financial officer. If Chloe was the muscle, Mark was the face. He was handsome, disarmingly charming, with a smile that could calm a nervous investor or disarm a hostile board. I trusted him completely. I trusted him with my dreams, my vulnerabilities, and the keys to my company. He was the anchor in my high-stress life. We were on the precipice of our greatest achievement, a contract with Innovate Dynamics. They were a massive, slightly mysterious tech conglomerate, and landing them wasn't just a win, it was a coronation. It meant Auratech was no longer a rising star. We were the star. The tension in the office was electric. This deal would make us all rich. It would cement our legacy. But for the past few months, the electricity felt wrong. It felt strained. There were meetings, endless strategy sessions about the Innovate deal that I was conspicuously not invited to. They always happened late, after the rest of the staff had gone home. Just Mark and Chloe. When I asked about it, Mark would laugh. Just crunching the numbers, Eliza. It would bore you to tears. You focus on the creative rollout. We'll handle the nuts and bolts. I tried to let it go, but I was the CEO. The nuts and bolts were my job, too. I pulled up the Innovate contract proposal one night, digging into the fine print. The payment structures were odd, complex, convoluted, routed in a way that seemed inefficient. I brought it to Mark the next morning, closing the door to his office. Mark, I'm not comfortable with these terms. Why are the retainers structured this way? It seems to expose us to unnecessary risk. He didn't even look up from his screen. He just sighed, a sound of mild exasperation. Eliza, honey, you're being too cautious. This is how the big leagues work. You just don't understand the big picture. He finally turned to me, flashing that $1,000,000 smile, the one that used to make my knees weak. Now, it just felt like a shield. Trust me, trust us. We know what we're doing. I was being dismissed. In my own company. From that day, the air changed. I felt like a ghost haunting my own halls. I would walk into the glass-walled conference room, and the conversation between Mark and Chloe would stop dead. They would exchange a look, a split-second communication that I was excluded from, before Chloe would turn to me. All business. Did you need something, Eliza? I was no longer their partner. I was an interruption. The isolation was suffocating. I started noticing things I had ignored before. The way Mark's hand would linger on Chloe's shoulder just a second too long when he passed her desk. The way they both had the same expensive brand of leather briefcase, one I didn't recognize. The shared jokes I wasn't privy to. I felt it in my gut. Something was deeply wrong. That night, I went home to our large, quiet house. Mark was, predictably, at another late-night session with Chloe. The silence of the house felt heavy, judgmental. I sat at my personal desk, not the company laptop, and opened a private browser window. I stared at my personal savings account, the money I had set aside from before the company, before Mark. My hand trembled as I typed in the routing numbers for a different account, an account Mark knew nothing about, an account that didn't exist on paper. I transferred $5,000. I grabbed my car keys, but not my purse. In the trunk of my car, beneath the spare tire and a roadside emergency kit, was a small, cheap, prepaid phone, a burner. I turned it on. The screen glowed a harsh blue in the darkness of the garage. I opened the single encrypted banking app installed on it. I typed in my credentials. The balance loaded. $82,000. I called it my doomsday fund. I had started it 2 years ago. It began quietly, almost innocently. Mark had started lying about small things. A charge for a lavish dinner at a restaurant I had never been to. Client dinner, he'd said, but the charge was on a Saturday, a cash withdrawal for $500. Office supplies, he'd claimed, but we had a corporate account for that. They were small lies, easily dismissed, but they were like hairline fractures in the foundation of our marriage, of my trust. So I started my own foundation. I siphoned off small portions of my personal bonuses, a little from my savings each month. I built a wall of my own, dollar by dollar. I told myself it was just insurance, a paranoid fantasy for a worst-case scenario. Staring at that balance in the dark garage, the cold dread washing over me, I knew the worst-case scenario was already here. That $82,000 wasn't paranoia. It was the only thing I had left that was real. Tuesday morning was bright, the kind of sharp, clear Texas morning that usually filled me with energy. I walked into the Oratech lobby at 8:50 a.m., just like any other day. My assistant, Sarah, met me by the elevator, but she wouldn't make eye contact. Her face was pale. "Eliza," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "They're waiting for you in the main conference room. They said it was urgent." They, who's they? Sarah, Mr. Vance, and Ms. Rivera, and Mr. Graves is with them. Graves, our corporate attorney. A cold spike of adrenaline shot through me, so intense it made my vision tunnel for a second. The Doomsday Fund flashed in my mind. Did they say what it's about? No, they just said to send you in the moment you arrived. I nodded, my mouth suddenly dry. I walked down the hall, my heels clicking on the polished concrete. The sound echoed too loudly in the quiet office. I pushed open the heavy glass door. The air in the room was not just cold, it was refrigerated. Mark sat at the head of the long, gleaming table, not in his usual spot. Chloe was to his right, and Mr. Graves to his left. 3 judges, and I was just walking into the dock. "Mark, Chloe, what's going on?" My voice sounded weak, uncertain. "Eliza, sit down," Chloe said. Her tone was flat, devoid of any familiarity. She gestured to the single empty chair at the far end of the table. I felt like I was being interviewed for a job I already had. I sat. My heart was a cold, hard knot in my chest. We've called this emergency meeting of the board," Chloe began, reading from a prepared statement on her tablet. "Due to the discovery of severe financial irregularities." Mr. Graves slid a sheaf of papers across the table toward me. "Ms. Vance, we have found conclusive proof of gross misconduct and embezzlement on your part." I stared at the papers. They were bank transfers, dozens of them, spanning the last 6 months. Large sums of money, thousands of dollars at a time, moved from Oratech's main accounts to an offshore entity I had never heard of. And at the bottom of each authorization form was my signature. "What is this?" I said, my voice shaking. "This isn't real. I've never seen these. This isn't my signature." "Eliza, please don't make this harder," Mark said. He sounded heartbroken. His voice was thick with manufactured pain. He rubbed his temples, his eyes squeezed shut, the very picture of a man in agony. I found them. I couldn't believe it. Found them, Mark. These are forgeries. Look at them, Chloe. You know my signature. This is insane. Chloe looked at me with something worse than hatred, pity, cold, sterile pity. Eliza, we have digital logs. We have the wire confirmations. The money is gone. We traced the account. It's registered to a shell corporation. A shell corporation linked to you. That's a lie, I shouted, standing up so fast my chair screeched against the floor. You know me. I built this company. Why would I do this? That's what I've been asking myself for months, Mark said, finally opening his eyes. They were wet. He was actually crying. It was a masterful performance. I saw the small transfers first. I covered for you. I thought you were just stressed, that you'd pay it back. I moved funds around to hide it. I didn't want to believe the woman I loved was a thief. The words hit me like physical blows. The man I loved. He said it in the past tense. He slid his own tablet to the center of the table. I'm so sorry, Chloe. Mr. Graves. I tried to handle this privately, but the Innovate deal, the due diligence, it was all going to come out. I couldn't hide it anymore. It was a performance for them, for the lawyer, a perfectly scripted tragedy, and I had been cast as the villain without ever seeing the script. Chloe, the operator, took over. Given this clear and egregious breach of your fiduciary duty and ethics, I moved to vote on the immediate termination of Eliza Vance as CEO. Furthermore, per the moral turpitude clause in our partnership agreement, I moved to void her shares, effective immediately, to be absorbed back into the company. Void my shares, everything I had built, my entire life's work. You can't do this, I whispered. My legs gave out, and I sank back into the chair. Chloe, please. Mark, this is a mistake. Someone is framing me. Mr. Graves cleared his throat. The evidence is, unfortunately, overwhelming. The motion is on the floor. All in favor. Chloe said, her voice like a nail being hammered into a coffin. I looked at Mark, my husband, the man I had breakfast with just yesterday morning. His face was a mask of profound sorrow. He held my gaze, his blue eyes swimming with fake tears, and he delivered the killing blow. With the deepest regret, my vote didn't matter. I was outnumbered. It was over, just like that. Mr. Graves looked at his watch. The motion carries. Eliza Vance is no longer an employee or shareholder of Oratech Solutions. The next part was a blur, a horrible, fast-forward montage. My laptop, which was on the table in front of me, suddenly went black. A blue access-denied screen popped up. My company phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out. Email account deactivated. Server connection lost. They had a security team waiting. 2 men I didn't recognize, dressed in neat black suits, entered the room as if on cue. They had a cardboard box. Ma'am, one of them said, not unkindly, we'll need to escort you from the premises. No, I stammered. My things, my office. Your personal effects have already been packed. Ms. Vance, Chloe said, standing up and smoothing her skirt. She was already moving on. Mark, I pleaded, one last, desperate appeal. He wouldn't look at me. He just stared at his hands on the table. I can't. Eliza, I can't. They walked me out, past Sarah, who was openly weeping at her desk, past the baffled faces of my employees, the people I had hired, the team I had built. They stared as the CEO was walked out of her own building by security, clutching a small brown box containing a framed photo, a potted plant, and a coffee mug. The elevator doors opened. The lobby. The revolving glass door pushed me out onto the street. I stood on the sidewalk in the bright, cheerful 9 a.m. sunlight. The traffic rushed by. People walked past me, living their normal lives. I was holding the box. My keys were in my pocket. But my company, my money, my reputation, all of it was gone. I stood there for a full 10 minutes. I didn't cry. I didn't move. I couldn't speak. I couldn't even breathe. The shock was a physical weight, crushing my chest, silencing me completely. They hadn't just fired me. They had erased me. I don't remember the drive home. I must have been on autopilot, my mind a hollow shell. The cardboard box sat on the passenger seat, a pathetic symbol of my life's work. I pulled into the driveway of our beautiful modern glass and steel house, the house I had made the down payment on, with my first big bonus, before Mark was ever in the picture. I fumbled with my keys, my hands shaking so violently it took 3 tries to get the door open. The silence hit me first. It wasn't the usual, peaceful quiet of an empty house. It was a dead, sterile silence. The air was still. The house felt wrong, hollowed out, as if its soul had been vacuumed out. "Mark," I called out. My voice was a dry croak. No answer. Of course not. He was at the office. My office. Sitting in my chair. Probably. I walked, almost drifting, through the foyer, past the living room with its floor-to-ceiling windows. I went straight to our bedroom. The bed was perfectly made, not a ripple in the duvet. I opened the door to his walk-in closet. It was half empty. All his expensive, tailored suits were gone. His shoes were gone. His travel-worn leather dop kit was gone from the bathroom counter, and in the space where his 2 large suitcases were always stored, there was nothing, just dust. A cold, sick feeling, sharper than the shock, began to crawl up my throat. I turned, slowly, and walked back downstairs, drawn by some terrible gravity to the kitchen. There, on the gleaming white marble island, was a thick, cream-colored envelope. It was propped up against the fruit bowl. My name was written on it in his familiar, confident script. My fingers felt numb as I opened it. It wasn't a letter. It was a stack of legal documents, a petition for divorce. It was already signed. By him. I scanned the pages, my vision blurring. I saw legal phrases, cold and brutal, irreconcilable differences, and then, in the section for cause, my breath stopped. Petitioner cites respondents' erratic and unstable behavior, escalating financial infidelity, and misappropriation of marital and business assets. Financial infidelity. He was using the lies from the meeting, the lies he created. He was using the embezzlement frame-up as the legal basis to divorce me. I dropped the papers. They scattered across the kitchen floor. This wasn't a spontaneous decision. This wasn't Mark reacting to a shocking discovery. This was a plan. A coordinated, meticulously executed plan. The meeting this morning wasn't the beginning. It was the end. I scrambled for my phone. My real phone, not the burner. I pulled up our joint bank account app. My fingerprint unlocked it. The balance stared back at me. $312.58. There should have been over $60,000 in there. Our operating cash, our life. It was all gone. He had drained it. Legally, as my husband and the CFO, he could, and he had. No, 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 I whispered, the words finally coming. I backed away, hitting the counter. I pulled my wallet out of my bag, my corporate Amex, my personal Visa. I grabbed my laptop from my bag, the personal one they hadn't taken, and tried to log into my Visa account. Your account has been suspended due to unusual activity. I tried the Amex. Card declined. I tried to pay my utility bill online. Declined. My cell phone. Declined. They hadn't just fired me. They hadn't just left me. They had cut every wire. They had severed every lifeline. I was standing in a multi-million-dollar house that I could no longer pay the electricity for, with no job, no money, and a reputation as a criminal. The divorce petition wasn't just ending our marriage. It was a legal weapon to seize all remaining assets, to leave me with nothing but the clothes I was wearing. I realized with a nauseating lurch that they had been planning this for months, maybe a year. Every late-night strategy session, every secretive look, every time Mark had dismissed my concerns about the Innovate deal, they weren't just planning a merger, they were planning my execution. I couldn't stay there. I couldn't breathe the air in that house. It was his. It was theirs. It had never been mine. I grabbed my purse, my personal laptop, and the pathetic cardboard box. I left the divorce papers scattered on the floor. I walked out the front door and didn't look back. I drove until the city lights of Austin faded in my rearview mirror. I drove until the sleek, modern architecture gave way to strip malls and fast food joints. I was on the outskirts of town, in a part of the city I never visited. I saw a sign, the Lone Star Motel, weekly rates, vacancy. I pulled in. The office smelled like stale cigarettes and bleach. I walked up to the counter, my designer clothes and leather handbag completely out of place. "A room for a week," I said to the tired-looking woman behind the glass. "That'll be $350, she said, not looking up from her television. I opened my wallet. I had $400 in emergency cash tucked into a hidden flap. The cash I kept for I don't know what, a flat tire, a lost wallet. Not for my entire life imploding. I slid the bills through the slot. I paid in cash. She slid a key back to me. Room 112. The room was beige and brown. The carpet was thin. The air conditioner rattled loudly. I placed my box on the cheap laminate desk and my laptop beside it. I sat on the edge of the bed, the stiff comforter crackling beneath me. I was alone. I had no one to call. My husband had betrayed me. My best friend had betrayed me. I had $312 in a bank account I couldn't access and $50 in cash in my wallet. It was all gone. Everything. In the span of 3 hours. My company. My husband. My home. My money. My name. They thought they had left me with nothing. They thought I was broken. And in that moment, sitting on that lumpy bed, I locked the deadbolt on the motel room door. The sound, a heavy metallic clunk, seemed to echo in the small beige space. I leaned back against the flimsy wood, and for the first time since I walked out of that glass tower, my legs gave out. I slid down the door until I was sitting on the thin, scratchy carpet, and then I broke. It wasn't a dignified cry. It was a raw, animal sound of grief and fury. I wept for my company, the thing I had built from an idea sketched on a napkin. I wept for my marriage, the 7 years I had dedicated to a man who was, it turned out, a complete stranger. I wept for my reputation, my name, which was at this very moment being dragged through the mud, painted as a common criminal. Mark and Chloe hadn't just staged a coup. They had taken a scalpel to my life and cut out every part of it, leaving me to bleed out in a cheap motel. I cried until my throat was raw and my eyes were swollen shut. The room was dark now, the only light coming from the gap under the curtains, stained orange by the motel's buzzing vacancy sign. My first coherent thought was to run, to just disappear. I still had that cash in my wallet, a few dollars, but more importantly, I had the Doomsday Fund, $82,000. I could go anywhere. I could change my name, find a small town in Oregon or Vermont, get a simple job, and just be gone. I could let Eliza Vance, the disgraced CEO, vanish from the face of the earth. It was a seductive thought, a life with no expectations, no pressure, no one to betray me. I let the fantasy play out for a full hour. Me, working as a barista, renting a small apartment over a bookstore, the quiet, simple, anonymous life. But then, a new feeling rose up, colder and heavier than the grief. It was rage, a pure, structural, diamond-hard rage. Running away was what they wanted. They had built this elaborate cage for me, and disappearing was just me locking the door myself. They would get away with it. They would have my company, my money, and the narrative. They would tell everyone how they sadly, reluctantly had to oust their brilliant but troubled partner. They would be the heroes. I would be the cautionary tale. No, I would not run. They didn't just take my money. They took my name. They took the years of my life, the all-nighters, the sacrifices. They turned my creative spark into a tool for their own greed. They had made a fatal miscalculation. They had assumed that by taking away my titles and my bank accounts, they had taken away my power. But I wasn't just the creative brain. I was the architect, and an architect knows how a building is structured, which means she also knows exactly where the load-bearing walls are. She knows how to bring the whole thing down. My tears dried. My breathing steadied. I stood up, my legs shaking but holding. I was no longer a victim. I was a problem they had failed to solve. I went back out to my car. The motel parking lot was almost empty, lit by a single flickering floodlight. I opened my trunk, pulled back the carpet lining, and lifted the spare tire, taped to the metal frame of the car. Inside an oil-stained canvas bag were the burner phone and its matching debit card. I had set them up 2 years ago, after the first lie, and I had never touched them since. I went back inside the room, locked the door again, and sat on the edge of the bed. I powered on the phone. The screen was bright, generic. I opened the banking app. There it was. Balance $82,000. This was never an escape fund. I saw that now. I had been saving it for a disaster. And this was the disaster. This wasn't money to run from something. It was money to fight with. This was my war chest. The plan wasn't just the money. The plan was what this money would now buy. I opened the phone's contact list. There was only one entry, a name I had added after one of the most intriguing and unsettling interviews of my career, Julian Digit Miles. We had been looking for a new head of cybersecurity about 8 months ago. Julian had come in on a recommendation. He was brilliant, cynical, and wore a hoodie to a 6-figure job interview. He had spent half the meeting explaining all the ways Auratech was vulnerable, not as a sales pitch, but as a statement of fact. He saw security as a personal affront. I had been impressed. Mark had been dismissive. Chloe had been openly hostile. After he left, Chloe had said, "Absolutely not. He's too paranoid, and his rate is astronomical. He's too expensive." I remembered thinking at the time, his paranoia is what you pay him for. Chloe had vetoed him. She had hired a cheaper firm, one that probably looked the other way when she and Mark started building their back doors. Chloe's frugality had just become her biggest liability. My fingers, steady now, tapped the screen. I pressed call. It rang twice. A gruff, wary voice answered, "Yeah." "Mr. Miles, this is Eliza Vance." A pause. Not of shock, but of calculation. "Well, this is a hell of a time for you to be calling me. Ms. Vance, I read the news. Congratulations on your early retirement." "The news is a lie. I was framed by my husband and my partner." Another pause. "Okay, and why are you calling me?" My voice was flat, cold, and clear. All the hysteria was gone, burned away by the anger. "I need a forensic accountant and a cybersecurity expert. You were the best I ever interviewed. I'm guessing you still are." "I am," he said. "I'm also, as your partner pointed out, very expensive. I doubt you're in a position to afford me right now. Unless, of course, the embezzlement stories are true. They are not, but I have money. Money they don't know about." I took a breath. "I have $20,000 as a retainer, available right now. I can have it in your account in 5 minutes. I need you to find out what they're really doing. They're hiding something big. They needed me gone, and they needed my shares. They say I embezzled. I want you to find the money they're hiding. I want you to find everything." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. I could hear him breathing, maybe typing. 20,000, he finally said. "That gets you my attention, but if I find what you think I'm going to find, my full fee is going to be triple that." "If you find it," I said, "you'll get it. Do we have a deal? Send me the retainer, Julian said, and send me every single thing you suspect. Every odd meeting, every weird email, every gut feeling. I want it all. They called you the creative brain. It's time to get creative. He hung up. I immediately transferred the $20,000. The first phase of the plan was in motion. I had just spent almost a quarter of my entire net worth, but it was the best money I had ever spent. I sat down at the cheap motel desk, opened my personal laptop, and began to type. I wrote down everything: Innovate Dynamics, the late-night meetings, the weird payment structures, Mark's lies, Chloe's dismissal. They thought I was in a motel room crying. They were right, but I was done crying. Now, I was building a cage of my own, and I was going to make damn sure they walked right into it. We met 2 days later at 5 a.m. in a 24-hour diner off the highway that smelled of burnt coffee and old grease. I was in the back booth, wearing a baseball cap and sunglasses I'd bought at a gas station. I hadn't slept. I had just been existing, fueled by the cold adrenaline of my new reality. Julian slid into the booth opposite me. He looked exactly as I remembered, hoodie up, laptop bag slung over his shoulder, and eyes that seemed to be analyzing everything at once. He didn't order anything. He just pulled out his laptop, plugged it into the wall outlet by the booth, and opened it. The transfer came through, he said, his voice low. He didn't waste time on pleasantries. You were right. They're dirty, and they're sloppy. Sloppy Mark is meticulous. Meticulous, sure, Julian said, his fingers flying across the keyboard. He built a fortress. But he built it around the wrong things. He was so focused on building walls to keep you out. He didn't bother to patch the old service tunnels that I found 8 months ago. Chloe's cheap security firm never even ran a basic diagnostic. I've been inside their servers since an hour after you called me. He turned the laptop toward me. The screen was a black field with lines of code, but in the center was a schematic of the Oratech server. A single, heavily encrypted directory was glowing red. This is it, he said. The Innovate Dynamics file. Mark put a custom encryption wrapper on it himself. It's locked down from everyone, including internal admin accounts. Everyone except him and Chloe. He wasn't just hiding it from competitors. He was hiding it from you. My breath hitched, seeing the digital proof of his betrayal. The lines of code he himself had written to deceive me felt colder than the divorce papers. So you can't get in? I asked. Julian scoffed. I've been in for 6 hours. I'm not in this diner to tell you it's locked. I'm here to show you what's inside. He opened the directory. It was split into 2 subfolders, billing and projects. Okay, watch, he said. He clicked on billing. The folder was full. Hundreds of invoices, multi-page contracts, wire transfer confirmations, millions of dollars. Now, he said, here's the projects folder. He clicked it. It was empty. A single file sat in the directory, placeholder, brief. Kyext. It was 0 kilobytes. I stared at the screen, my blood running cold. I don't understand. Where are the workups, the creative decks, the campaign assets? There are none, Julian said, turning the laptop back to himself. There is no work, Eliza. Not a single deliverable, not one project file. They are billing Innovate Dynamics millions of dollars for literally nothing. The invoices are fake. The services were never rendered. It's a ghost client. I sank back against the vinyl booth. The big picture. He said I didn't understand the big picture. The big picture, Julian said, is that Oratech Solutions is a laundromat. Mark and Chloe are washing money. He began to type again, pulling up network diagrams that looked like spider webs. I've only just started tracing the inbound payments, but the pattern is clear. This isn't just about them stealing from the company. They are using the company. They're taking dirty money, from a source I haven't identified yet, and funneling it through Oratech. He pointed to the screen. Here, the money comes in from Innovate as consulting fees. It sits in an Oratech holding account for about 72 hours, just long enough to look legitimate. Then, it's routed out. How? Executive bonuses, Julian said, and the final piece clicked into place. Massive, 8-figure bonuses, all perfectly legal, all signed off on by the CFO and the COO. They're paying themselves with the laundered cash. They're not just stealing, they're cleaning. I finally understood. The motive. It wasn't just greed. It wasn't just the affair. It was necessity. They had to get rid of me, I whispered, the realization hitting me with physical force. That's why this was so extreme. Exactly, Julian said. You're the head of creative. You're the brain. You are the only person in that entire company who would eventually, inevitably, ask to see the work. You'd ask, what product are we designing for? Where is the strategy deck? Why haven't I met the client? They couldn't risk it. The Innovate deal was their biggest one ever, which means it was their biggest wash. They needed you gone before the final paperwork was signed. They needed your shares, and they needed you discredited so that when you screamed, no one would listen. They hadn't just framed me to get me out of the way. They had framed me because I was the only person who could have exposed them. My own creativity, my own intelligence, had made me their primary target. So we have them, I said, a dark, cold hope rising. We can prove it. Not yet, Julian said, his expression hardening. This is a good start, but it's not the whole story. The money trail from Innovate is clean. It's Oratech revenue. The money trail to them. That's the real prize. And it's buried deep. He tapped a few more keys, and a new name appeared on the screen. Innovate Dynamics is a shell company, he said. Incorporated in Delaware 6 months ago. Minimal assets. No employees listed. It's a cutout. But I found who owns it. Or rather, what owns it. The name on the screen was Rio Grande Holdings, LLC. Never heard of it, I said. Nobody has, Julian replied. It's a holding company that seems to own nothing but other holding companies. This is the real source. Eliza, this is the puppet master. Innovate is the puppet. Mark and Chloe. They're just the strings. They're not the masterminds. They're just the managers. A new, deeper layer of fear settled over me. I thought I was fighting my husband and my partner. I was wrong. I was fighting an unknown, unseen entity with millions of dollars in dirty money. My $82,000 fund suddenly felt like loose change. Find them, Julian, I said, my voice barely a whisper, but my resolve hardening. Find Rio Grande. Find out who they are. Julian shut his laptop. That's going to cost you more than the $20,000 you already paid. Just find them, I said. I'll get you the money. Julian's call came at 2 a.m. I had been dozing, fully clothed, on top of the scratchy motel bedspread. The burner phone's vibration was like an electric shock. They're good, he growled. No preamble. Too good. Rio Grande Holdings isn't a company. It's a digital black hole. The servers are routed through 3 different continents, military-grade encryption, and they purge their access logs every 60 seconds. I can't get a foothold. It's all just static. I'm trying to trace the money backward from Oratech, but Mark and Chloe built a damn fortress. I'm locked out. What does that mean? I said, sitting up, my heart sinking. It's over. It means, Julian grunted, that I can't break in from the outside. The digital trail is a dead end. They're too insulated. I need a key from the inside. I need a mistake, a piece of hardware, an email, a file. Something that came from within their system that they didn't have a chance to scrub. Without that, I'm just a guy banging on a steel door. He hung up. I stared at the dark motel room ceiling. A key from the inside. They had taken my keys. They had erased my access. They had escorted me out with a cardboard box. How could I get back inside? I replayed the last few months at Oratech. The tension. The odd looks. The closed-door meetings. And then it hit me. A memory. Sharp and sudden. David Pearson. He was a junior financial analyst, barely 24. He was smart, hungry, and one of the few people I had personally mentored. He was a numbers prodigy, the kind of person who found beauty in a perfectly balanced spreadsheet. Chloe had fired him 3 weeks ago. It had been sudden, brutal, and, at the time, baffling. Chloe had sent a company-wide email citing necessary restructuring. When I had questioned her, she'd been sharp. He wasn't a team player, Eliza. He was inefficient. It's handled. It hadn't felt right. David was the most efficient analyst we had. 3 weeks ago, right when they would have been finalizing the Innovate deal, right when they would have been laying the last bricks in my prison. He wasn't fired for being inefficient. He was fired because he saw something. I called Julian back. I think I have our mistake. Find me David Pearson. It took Julian less than a day. David, no longer employed at a high-flying tech firm, was working a temp-to-perm data entry job at an accounting office in a strip mall in North Austin. His bitterness was, as Julian put it, radiating through his LinkedIn profile. I found him on his lunch break, sitting on a concrete bench, eating a sandwich from a paper bag. He looked exhausted. The bright spark he used to have was gone, replaced by the dull resignation of someone just trying to make rent. I sat down next to him. David. He looked up, and his eyes went wide. He almost dropped his sandwich. Ms. Vance, what? I heard what happened. I'm so sorry. It was a lie. David, all of it. Mark and Chloe. They framed me. He flinched, looking around the empty parking lot. Ms. Vance, I really can't get involved in anything. I just lost my job. I can't. You lost your job because you were too good at it, I said, cutting him off. You saw the Innovate payments, didn't you? His head snapped back to me. The resignation was gone, replaced by a flash of anger. You know about that. I'm guessing, I said, pulling an envelope from my bag. I need your help. I'm fighting back, and I need to know what you saw. David stared at me, then at the envelope. She fired me an hour after I sent the email. An hour. I just asked for the project codes. The Innovate invoices. They were just numbers. Huge, round numbers. Millions of dollars. But there were no attachments, no expense reports, no hours logged, no deliverables. It was just money. It wasn't right. I flagged it. I asked Chloe where the supporting documentation was. And what did she say? She called me into her office, David said, his voice dropping. She wasn't just mad, Ms. Vance. She was scared. She was white-knuckled. She accused me of being insubordinate, of trying to disrupt a sensitive client relationship. She said I was fired, effective immediately. She did the same to me, I said, just on a grander scale. It's worse than that, David whispered. He leaned in. I think she was trying to frame me. My blood went cold. What do you mean? The day before I sent the email, I saw her at my desk. I was coming back from the break room. She was at my keyboard. She jumped when she saw me, said she was just checking a setting. I didn't think anything of it. But that night, I got paranoid. I was worried. I looked through my own system. She had been in my drafts folder. There was a new email, an email I didn't write. It was a request to wire funds to an offshore account. It was set to save, not to send. She was planting it. I think I was her first choice for a scapegoat. So when you asked about the invoices, you forced her hand, I whispered. She couldn't use you anymore. She had to get rid of you, and she moved on to me. I was terrified, David said. I knew they were going to wipe my laptop. I thought they'd accuse me of deleting files or plant something else, so I stayed late. I plugged in an external drive. He looked at me, his eyes full of a terrible, vindicated fear. I copied my entire workstation, a full disk image, everything, my emails, my drafts, my deleted items. my browser cache, everything. I've been too scared to even look at it. He reached into his worn messenger bag and pulled out a small, silver flash drive. "This is it," he said, holding it out to me. "I don't know what's on it, but I know that when I asked her about one name I saw on a memo, she looked at me like she wanted me to die." I took the drive. It was cool to the touch. "What was the name?" "David. Rio Grande Holdings," he said. I put the drive in my pocket. I took the envelope of cash and pressed it into his hand. "This is $5,000, David, for your time." He tried to hand it back. "I don't need—" "Yes, you do," I said. I pulled out a second, thicker envelope. "And this is 10,000 more. That makes 15,000. Listen to me very carefully. They are not just white-collar criminals. They are dangerous. They were willing to ruin you, and they did ruin me. They will find out we spoke. You need to disappear." His eyes widened. "Go visit your parents," I said. "Go to the beach. Pay cash. Do not use your cards. Do not log into your email. Be a ghost for a month. When this is over, I will find you. You will be my star witness. But for now, you are a liability. Please, be safe." He stared at the money, then at me. He nodded, the gravity of the situation finally settling on him. "Get them, Ms. Vance. Get them for both of us." He stood up and walked away, not looking back. I was alone on the bench, my hand in my pocket, clutching the key. I had just spent $35,000. My $82,000 fund was nearly halfway gone. I pulled out the burner phone and called Julian. "I've got it," I said. "I have a full hard drive from the inside. I have the key." The Lone Star Motel was no longer safe. The first thing I did was check out "Paying Cash" and drive across town to an anonymous high-rise business hotel. The kind with hundreds of rooms, bland corporate art, and high-speed internet. It cost me $2,000 for a week in a suite, another dip into my dwindling fund. But security was paramount. Julian met me there, his own gear in a heavy-duty Pelican case. The room became our war room. "Okay," he said, plugging his laptop into a tangle of power strips. "Let's see what the kid found." I handed him the small, silver flash drive. It felt impossibly heavy, like it contained a bomb. Maybe it did. Julian plugged it into a write-protected drive reader. Running it through a dozen virus and malware scanners first, David was smart to image the whole drive. People think deleting a file means it's gone. Amateurs. The real dirt is in the shadows, the cache, the temp files, the unallocated space. He worked for an hour, his eyes scanning screens filled with code. I just paced, a caged animal in a beige hotel suite. "Well," he said, finally leaning back. "The good news is, you were right to be paranoid. The bad news, it's so much worse than you thought." He turned one of his monitors toward me. It was a calendar, Mark's calendar, synced to David's machine through the company network. "They've been together," Julian said, his voice flat. "For a long time." He clicked on an entry from over a year ago. "Private dinner, C." Then another, 2 weeks later. "Weekend strategy session." The location was a boutique hotel in the hill country. There were dozens of them, hidden dinners, late-night meetings that were clearly personal, airline receipts for 2 on trips I was never invited on. It wasn't just a fling. It was a full-blown relationship. A shadow life lived right under my nose, funded by my company. The nausea was immediate, a sour bile rising in my throat. My marriage hadn't just failed. It had been a lie for over a year. "There's more," Julian said, his tone hardening. "This is where it gets ugly." He navigated deep into a folder of temporary system files. David was right. Chloe was on his machine, but she was careless. Or maybe Mark was. One of them used his computer to join a web call. Probably thought no one was around. The system, for some reason, recorded the audio and saved it to a temp cache before crashing. David's disk image grabbed it. He clicked a file. It was an audio file, just over 3 minutes long. My own voice, from a meeting, started playing, but it was distant. And then, I heard them, Mark and Chloe, their voices clear, talking over me. Chloe's voice. She's getting suspicious about the innovate terms. She was in my office this morning asking about the payment structure. We have to accelerate the timeline. Mark's voice. Relax. I can handle Eliza. She trusts me. I'll tell her she's just a creative, that she doesn't get the big picture. She'll back down. She always does. A cold, sharp pain lanced through my chest. She always does. Chloe. It's not enough. Mark. Backing down isn't good enough. What happens when she wants to see the product? What happens when she wants to meet the client? She's the only one who will know it's all vapor. We need her out. Not just out. We need her discredited. The embezzlement plan. Mark's voice was hesitant. It's extreme. It's cruel. It's necessary, Chloe snapped. We need a reason to void her shares. We need her to be a pariah. If she's just a disgruntled ex-wife, she's a problem. If she's a federal criminal, she's nothing. No one will listen to her. We trigger the moral turpitude clause. We take her shares and we are clean. It's the only way. A long pause. Then Mark's voice, colder than I had ever heard it. Okay, do it. I'll discover the files. The audio file ended. I stood frozen, my hands shaking. They hadn't just betrayed me. They had plotted my annihilation. They had discussed my cruel but necessary destruction like they were planning a marketing campaign. And now, Julian said, his fingers flying across the keyboard, the money. He pulled up a deleted email fragment, pieced back together from the drive's free space. It was from Chloe to a coded address, but the fragment contained a single critical string of text, a Swiss bank routing number. This is our link, Julian said. This is the account that funds Rio Grande Holdings, and it's registered to... He ran a trace. The name came up. A known international financier, a man whispered about in dark corners of the financial web, known for making regimes and cartels rich. And suddenly, I saw the entire thing, the full, breathtaking, monstrous picture. It's a 3-act play, I said, my voice hollow. Julian nodded, pulling up a whiteboard app, connecting the dots. Act 1, get the dirty money. This shady investor needs to clean his cash. He partners with Mark and Chloe. He creates Rio Grande, which in turn creates the client. Innovate dynamics. Act 2, wash the money. Julian continued. The investor, through Innovate, hires Oratech for millions in fake consulting fees. The money is now inside a legitimate, fast-growing U.S. tech company. Mark and Chloe then pay themselves, and presumably the investor, with the clean revenue, disguised as executive bonuses and dividends. Act 3. The exit. I finished, the full horror dawning on me. They needed me out of the way to do the wash, but the wash isn't the end game. I pointed to the screen. They're going to sell the company. They'll use my fraud as the reason. They'll say the company is in crisis, that the disgraced CEO has ruined its reputation. They'll trigger a panic sale. And the only buyer, the one waiting in the wings to save the company for pennies on the dollar, will be Innovate Dynamics. Julian's eyes widened. They're selling the company. To themselves. They'll get the clean money from the wash, and then they'll buy the entire infrastructure of Oratech, my reputation, my client list, my team using the other dirty money. They're not just earning. They're not just stealing. They're multiplying. They're tripling their profit. My marriage, my friendship, my 7 years of work, it was all just collateral damage, a line item in their bloody spreadsheet. I realized then, with chilling certainty, that they never intended for me to recover. They weren't just firing me. They were trying to bury me. They needed me to be a broken, penniless criminal so I could never, ever come back. So I could never, ever tell this story. I looked at my burner phone. I checked the account balance. After the retainer for Julian, the money for David, The new hotel suite I had $47,000 left. It was almost nothing compared to the millions they were moving. But they had made one mistake. They had left me alive. And they had left me $47,000. It was time to go on the attack. Julian looked at me, the audio file of Mark and Chloe's betrayal still echoing in the quiet hotel room. So, we take this to the cops. We're done. I shook my head. The thought was tempting. A quick, clean call to the authorities. But I knew better. I knew Mark. I knew Chloe. No, I said, my voice firm. We don't go to the police. Not yet. Are you crazy? Julian stood up. Eliza, you have a recording of them admitting to a massive financial conspiracy and plotting to frame you. It's a slam dunk. It's not, I argued, pacing the room. What we have is an audio file from an illegal hard drive copy. It's inadmissible, a fruit of the poisonous tree. A good lawyer, and with the kind of money they're moving, they will have the best lawyers will have it thrown out of court in 30 seconds. Then they'll have David and me charged with corporate espionage. They'll bury us in legal fees, stall for years, and by the time the dust settles, the money will be gone. Auratech will be a shell, and we'll be ruined. They're insulated. Julian hated that I was right. So what? We just let them win? No, I said, a cold, sharp strategy forming in my mind. We don't attack their fortress with lawyers. We poison their water supply. We make the fortress irrelevant. They're insulated from the law, but they are not insulated from their partners or their own greed. I opened my laptop and pulled up the Auratech cap table from memory. Mark and I owned 60%. Chloe owned 10%. The other 30% is owned by who? Eleanor Harding, I said. A flicker of recognition crossed Julian's face. Eleanor Harding wasn't just an investor. She was Austin royalty. Old money. Impeccable reputation. She was on the board of the university, the museum, the symphony. She had been our angel investor, the one who gave us our initial seed money based on a 30-minute pitch. She was notoriously hands-off, trusting us to run the company. But her one rule was ironclad: do good work and do not ever embarrass me. Mark and Chloe were about to embarrass her on a scale she couldn't imagine. She's the weak point, I said. She has the power to freeze accounts. She has the reputation to make the entire Austin business community turn on them overnight. We don't need to prove I'm innocent. We just need to prove they are guilty of the one thing she can't forgive, risking her good name. My remaining $47,000 had to be used with surgical precision. This wasn't a war chest, it was a scalpel. Okay, Julian, here's the plan. Phase 1. I transferred $20,000 from the burner account. I need you to hire a public relations firm, the best crisis PR firm in Texas. Do it through a shell cutout. They're being hired by a nameless client for a potential future situation. We're putting them on retainer. We're not using them yet. But when this bomb goes off, I'm not going to be the one reacting to the news. I'm going to be the one writing it. Julian nodded, a slow, grim smile spreading. I know a guy. He's a shark. He'll have them on standby. Phase 2, I continued. The package. You're going to create a data dump. Encrypted, anonymous, untraceable. Put everything in it. The fake Innovate invoices, the empty project folders, the money trail from Rio Grande, the Swiss bank routing number, proof of the affair, everything that shows the money laundering. But, and this is critical, not the audio file. Not yet. This can't look like my personal revenge. This has to look like a financial whistleblower. It has to be cold, hard, undeniable financial crime. Got it, he said. The motive is profit, not justice. Clean. Exactly. That package needs to be sent to 2 people, simultaneously. First, to Eleanor Harding's personal private email. I know you can find it. Second, to Jenna Harrison at the Texas Chronicle. The journalist, Julian asked, raising an eyebrow. She's a bulldog. She'll tear them apart. That's the point. Eleanor is the muscle. Jenna is the megaphone. Eleanor will freeze their assets. Jenna will destroy their reputation. We'll hit them from the inside and the outside at the same time. Julian was already typing, his fingers a blur. This is good. This is very good. They'll be too busy putting out the fire with the press to see Eleanor coming at them with an extinguisher full of concrete. It's not enough, I said. They're a team. They've been a team for over a year. They trust each other. They'll circle the wagons. We need to break that trust. We need to make them turn on each other. This was the final piece. The psychological warfare. Julian, after the packages are sent, I want you to wait 1 hour. Let them receive them. Let the oh my God moment happen. Then, I want you to send one single, anonymous text message. Send it to both Mark's and Chloe's personal cell phones at the exact same time. What does it say? I thought for a moment. What would sever that bond? What would make a thief mistrust their partner? It should say, Eleanor knows about Rio Grande. She's moving to freeze the accounts. Good luck. Julian stopped typing. He looked at me, a newfound respect in his eyes. You're an artist, Eliza. That's pure poison. What will happen? I asked, though I already knew. Pure, unadulterated panic, Julian said, leaning back in his chair. The journalist is a problem they can no comment. But Eleanor, she's God, and good luck isn't a threat. It's a piece of friendly advice. It implies the sender is on the inside, and freeze the accounts is the magic phrase. There's only so much money in the pot, and the music just stopped. Chloe will immediately assume Mark is trying to cut her out and run. Mark will assume Chloe has her own escape plan. It's a race to the bottom. Whoever talks first, whoever betrays the other one, might just get to keep a fraction of the money. Their partnership is built on greed. We're just giving that greed a deadline. Do it, I said. My heart was pounding. A cold, heavy drumbeat. Julian hit a few keys. Packages are away. They're on a 5-minute timer. The PR firm is on retainer. The text message is queued. We sat in the silent hotel room. The trap was set. The bait was laid. My remaining $27,000 suddenly felt like a fortune. We weren't trying to outspend them. We were just giving them exactly enough rope to hang themselves. And each other. The first domino fell at 6 a.m. Julian, who hadn't slept, just grunted and pointed to his monitor. It's live. Jenna Harrison's article had just hit the front page of the Texas Chronicle's website. The headline was devastating. Aura Tech Solutions Austin's tech darling, or a multi-million-dollar mirage. It was exactly what we had planned. It didn't contain the audio file. It didn't mention me or the frame-up. It was a cold, brutal piece of financial journalism. It detailed the ghost client. Innovate dynamics. Questioning the nature of the tens of millions of dollars in consulting fees for no discernible product. It named Rio Grande Holdings as the opaque parent company. It was a masterpiece of implication, filled with damning questions that painted Auratech as a potential house of cards. But Auratech is a private company, I said, my voice hoarse from the hotel air. This won't crash their stock. Julian gave me a pitying look. It's not about public stock. Eliza, it's about valuation. Their entire sky-high valuation was based on the Innovate contract. It was their single biggest asset. Jenna Harrison just proved that asset is, at best, questionable, and at worst, completely fraudulent. The valuation they were using to secure loans, the valuation they were planning to use to negotiate their own sale. It just evaporated. In the space of 5 minutes, Auratech has become worthless. The article was the public wound. Eleanor's move was the internal hemorrhage. We knew it had happened when Julian's server monitor, which was tracking Auratech's financial accounts, suddenly lit up with activity. And, there she is, he said, watching the logs. 9:05 a.m. Eleanor Harding's lawyers just filed an emergency injunction. All Auratech corporate assets, frozen. All executive accounts linked to the company, frozen. All credit lines, suspended, pending a full independent forensic audit. Eleanor, I knew, would be incandescent. It wasn't about the money she had lost. It was the fact that they had dared to use her good name as a shield for their filth. They're trapped, I whispered. It wasn't a question. The money is gone. Julian shook his head. Not gone. Just locked. That's the beauty of it. They can see it. Sitting right there in their accounts. All those millions. But they can't touch it. They can't pay their high-priced lawyers. They can't book a flight. They're locked in the vault with all the money they stole. And the walls are closing in. And now, Julian said, cracking his knuckles, we watch the rats eat each other. He still had his back door, not just into the main server, but into their individual machines. The panic, he explained, wouldn't look like screaming. It would look like silence. They've shut down all official communication, he said, pointing to the dead internal chat logs. No emails, no company pings. They're smart enough for that. They've gone dark. Or so they think, he added, a grim smile touching his lips. He switched screens, pulling up a mirror of Chloe's personal laptop. She's not on the company network. She's at her condo, using her private Wi-Fi. But she's forgotten about the custom keyboard logger I installed on her machine when I was just a paranoid applicant 8 months ago. I've been reading every keystroke for 2 days. We watched as Chloe's screen activity became frantic. She was on a Swiss bank website, her personal bank, the one she'd been using to skim her share. She was trying to initiate a wire transfer. She's running. I breathed. She's trying to move $2.5 million to an unflagged account in the Cayman Islands. She's trying to run, Julian corrected. But the bank is stalling. With Eleanor's injunction and the news article, her funds are probably flagged by compliance. But her attempt, that's the real gift. He switched screens again. Now, let's look at Mark. My husband was doing something different. He wasn't trying to move money. He was drafting an email to his personal lawyer. Julian had compromised his home office computer weeks ago. We read the draft as Mark typed it, deleted it, and retyped it, his panic palpable in every sentence. I am writing to you under absolute attorney-client privilege. I have reason to believe I have been duped. I am the victim of a complex conspiracy perpetrated by my business partner, Chloe Rivera. She handled all financial operations and accounts. I was focused on strategy and client relations. I have evidence she was planning to flee the country and leave me to take the fall. I am willing to cooperate fully with any investigation in exchange for immunity. He's going to flip, I said, stunned. He's going to turn state's witness. He's going to hand her to the feds to save his own skin. Our text message worked perfectly, Julian said. That good luck was a masterpiece. He thinks she's already betraying him, and he's right. He's just trying to get to the finish line first. He's trying to sell the only asset he has left, his testimony against her. They weren't partners anymore. They were two co-conspirators in a locked room, and the oxygen was running out. They were destroying each other, just as I knew they would. My part in the shadows was over. The chaos was self-sustaining now. It's done, I said to Julian. They're finished. He looked at me, his work complete. My final fee, Eliza. As we discussed. I nodded. I opened the burner app on my phone for the last time. I transferred $20,000 to his account. It was a massive sum, but he had earned every penny. He had saved my life. What now? He asked, shutting down his systems, wiping his presence from their network, and from my life, for good. I stood up and walked to the hotel door. I had $7,000 left to my name. Now, I said, I stopped being a ghost. I was going shopping. I needed a new suit, a suit of armor, and I needed a plane ticket. I wasn't going to watch this end from a hotel room. I was going to be there for the final curtain. I flew back to Austin on a Tuesday morning, exactly 1 week after my life had been detonated. I didn't go to the motel. I didn't go to the house I used to live in. I checked into the Four Seasons, using the last of my $7,000. I spent $3,000 on a suit from a high-end boutique, a sharp, black, beautifully tailored suit. It wasn't a purchase. It was an investment. It was armor. The call came from Eleanor Harding's personal assistant at 10 a.m. An emergency board meeting had been called for 3 p.m. My presence was requested. I had contacted Eleanor through the PR firm I had put on retainer the moment I knew Mark and Chloe were turning on each other. I had told her the financial crimes were just the appetizer. I had the main course, and I was serving it today. I walked into the 19th floor lobby of the Oratech building. The receptionist, the same one who had watched me be escorted out by security, gasped. I gave her a small, tight smile and walked past her, not breaking my stride. I could hear them before I even reached the conference room. Their voices were sharp, panicked, and dripping with venom. The heavy glass door was slightly ajar. "You move money into an offshore account without me. You were going to leave me there." That was Mark. His voice wasn't charming anymore. It was a raw, terrified shriek. "You were the one talking to a lawyer. You idiot." Chloe's voice was like broken glass. "Trying to pin it all on me. You set up the Innovate deal. You signed the bonuses. You're the one who brought in Rio Grande. You're the one who said Eliza had to be handled. We both handled her, and now look, you were weak." I pushed the door open. They all stopped. The room was exactly as I had left it, only this time, it was filled with expensive lawyers in dark suits. Eleanor Harding sat at the head of the table, her face a mask of cold fury. And at the other end, Mark and Chloe, their faces pale and slick with sweat, frozen in mid-argument. They stared at me as if they were seeing a ghost. My ghost. Mark was the first to find his voice. He half stood, knocking over a glass of water. "Eliza." "What?" "What are you doing here? You can't be here." I walked calmly to the empty chair beside Eleanor Harding. I placed my new leather briefcase on the table and clicked it open. "I believe this is still my board meeting," I said, my voice resonating in the dead silence. I was never properly removed. The vote, as I'm sure Mrs. Harding's auditors have discovered, was based on manufactured evidence. A fraud. I pulled out the small silver flash drive. David's flash drive. I held it up. "You've all seen the financial crimes," I said, my voice steady. "You've seen the fake invoices and the empty project folders. You know about the money laundering, but you're still arguing about who is to blame. You're still pointing fingers. I think it's time we clear that up." I looked directly at Eleanor. "Mrs. Harding, perhaps you'd like to hear this audio. It's from a cached system file. It clarifies the why of it all." Chloe's lawyer shot to his feet. "This is inadmissible. This is a violation." Eleanor held up a hand. "Sit down, counsel. This is not a court of law. This is a public execution. Play it. Ms. Vance." I slid the flash drive into the table's central port and clicked the file. The speakers in the ceiling, the ones we'd installed for client video calls, crackled to life. First, my own voice, distant. Then, the voices that had haunted my nights. Chloe's voice. "She's getting suspicious. We have to accelerate the timeline." Mark's voice. "I'll tell her she's just a creative. She'll back down. She always does." I watched Mark's face. The blood drained from it. He was looking at Chloe with pure, unadulterated hatred. Chloe's voice. "We need her out. Not just out. We need her discredited." Mark's voice. "It's extreme. It's cruel." Chloe. "It's necessary. If she's a federal criminal, she's nothing. We take her shares and we are clean." The room was so quiet I could hear the air conditioning. Every lawyer, even Eleanor, was looking at Mark and Chloe with a kind of profound, disgusted horror. Then, Mark's final words on the recording, the epitaph of our marriage. "Okay, do it. I'll discover the files." The audio file ended. Silence. Mark didn't say anything. He just made a sound, a low, guttural noise. And then he lunged. He wasn't lunging at me. He was lunging for the flash drive, a desperate, animal attempt to destroy the evidence. He never made it. The conference room doors opened again, this time with a decisive, heavy swing. Two men in suits, Detective Harris and Detective Chin, stepped into the room. They had been waiting in the hallway, An arrangement Eleanor and I had made yesterday. I wouldn't, Mr. Vance, Detective Harris said. His voice was calm, authoritative. Mark froze, his hand hovering over the port. We already have a copy. Mrs. Harding's head of security was kind enough to provide it. Mark and Chloe turned, their faces a mask of ultimate, final panic. The game was over. Mark Vance, the detective said, you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit wire fraud, embezzlement, and securities fraud. He nodded to his partner, who pulled Mark's hands behind his back. The click of the handcuffs was the loudest sound I had ever heard. Chloe Rivera, Harris continued, you are under arrest for the same. You have the right to remain silent. Chloe didn't fight. She just crumpled, all the relentless operator gone, replaced by a terrified, defeated woman. They were cuffed. They were being led out of my conference room. They walked past me, and for the first time, I wasn't the one being escorted out. Mark stopped. He had to. I was standing in his path. He looked at me, his eyes wild, pleading, furious. I leaned in, just close enough for him to hear me. You took my company, I whispered. You took my house, and you took 7 years of my life. You thought I was just the creative. You thought I was nothing without you. I smiled. But you underestimated my $82,000 plan. The detective gently pulled him away. I watched him go. I watched them both disappear down the hall. I let out a breath I felt like I had been holding for a week, or a year, or a lifetime. I turned back to the room, to Eleanor Harding. The company was in ruins. It would be dissolved, but my name was clear. She stood up and walked over to me, extending her hand. That was, she said, the most magnificent counterplay I have ever witnessed. You have my full apology and my full backing, whatever you decide to do next. I shook her hand. Thank you. Eleanor. I picked up my flash drive. I closed my briefcase. I turned, and I walked out of the glass conference room, past the stunned faces of the lawyers, past the weeping receptionist. I walked to the elevator, and for the first in a very long time, I pressed the button for the lobby. I left the entire smoking ruin behind me. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I'd love to know where you're listening from, so please drop a comment below, share your thoughts, and let's connect. Please subscribe to Lily Revenge Stories, like this video, and hit that hype button to help more people hear this story.